While I wasn't exactly the best of Christians, I've always believed in God. You wouldn't see me in church every Sunday, but I would make a good attempt to go during Easter and Christmas Mass. On some Wednesdays, every couple of years, you would even see me with a piece of ash on my face. That was, of course, before that drunk driver decided that my Honda looked like it needed to be compressed to half its size. I don't remember much about the accident itself or my subsequent stay in the hospital, but this story isn't about that. This story is about what I saw when I was dead for 6 minutes. One moment I was driving down Roosevelt Avenue, minding my own business and waiting for a light to turn green. The next moment I felt a huge shift in weight and everything went black. When I saw the light at the end of a dark tunnel, I guessed what had happened to me. I had died. I knew I was a good person. I treated my family kindly. My many years on this earth had taught me that people were essentially good. I wasn't afraid to go into that white light, despite the fact that I was leaving my life behind me, because I knew that I would see them soon enough. So I went into the light. The next thing I knew, I had a physical body. I could feel a light coolness on my skin and the soft fabric of a comfortable loose shirt and pants. The small white dots and brown moles that had lit at my forearms from long days of physical labor were gone, and my skin felt as smooth as a baby's bottom. If I could look in a mirror, I would probably see a version of myself much younger than the 44 I currently was. "You done admiring the new duds?" The voice surprised me. It sounded too normal? "Sorry, it's just a lot to get used to," I said to the voice that I couldn't place. "Wait a minute, where the hell are you?" "Here!" The voice was coming from my right, and my eyes adjusted to the point that I could make out a silhouette against the light that surrounded me. The light seemed to die down a bit, and I could finally make out the silhouette. Like me, he was in a loose-fitting white shirt and white pants, and there was something weird about his hair. "Can you hear me now?" he said. "What?" I could hear him the whole time. Why was he asking me if I could hear him? "Sorry, bad joke. My social skills are a bit rusty." I thought for a second before finally placing why he asked that. "Are you quoting that Verizon commercial from a decade ago?" My vision cleared enough to find out the weird thing I had noticed about his hair. He had a dark purple foxhawk. He sighed. "And again, I fail at being funny. Has it really been a decade?" On top of the foxhawk, he also had a face piercing. If he hadn't been wearing the same loose white clothing I was, he would probably be at home in a Fall Out Boy concert circa 2005. It was 2018 last time I checked. God damn. You'll realize after being here a while that time doesn't mean much of anything here. In heaven? The emo kid barked a quick laugh. Yeah, heaven. I looked around in every direction. As far as I could see, it was only endless whiteness with nothing in visual distance beside myself and... "What's your name?" I asked the emo kid. "Daniel." "Alright, Daniel." Yeah, my eyes were fully adjusted and there was definitely nothing. If this is heaven, then where the hell is everything? He looked at me in silence for a second. I'm not the only one making bad jokes right now, apparently." I took in a quick breath to calm myself before I yelled at what I presumed was some sort of angel or psychopomp or whatever the hell this kid was supposed to be. "Is heaven really standing around with you in a white nothingness for all eternity?" Daniel looked at me sadly. No, it's not. I just wanted to spend as much time away as possible." Daniel wanted to spend as much time away as possible. From heaven. Why? I asked the one question I had stirring in my brain. He looked off into the blank distance in silence before answering. I guess you have to find out sooner or later." I was about to ask what the hell he was talking about when I felt a sudden shifting. That stomach-dropping feeling of sitting in a roller coaster as it drops from 100 feet. And there was suddenly a gate in front of us. White pillars reached into the air far enough that I couldn't see the top. Between the pillars were bright walls, of what looked like solid sheets of marble that extended far into the heavens. What the fuck just happened? I almost fell over from the sudden shift of location, and the appearance of vertigo-inducing walls where nothing had existed before. That, he motioned towards the wall in a defeated gesture, is where we are going, unfortunately. Daniel, I noticed a light bringer coming from the top of the wall and pointed towards it. What's that light? He looked up at where I was pointing. Don't look directly at it unless you want a blinding headache. I stared as the light grew brighter and brighter. It was getting just close enough that I could see a pair of wings somewhere in the bright shining light of its core. There was another pair behind the first, and another somewhere closer to its leg. Its head looked like the head of a lion. No, wait, it was an ox head. But it had a beak and a human mouth.
Don't be afraid.
A voice boomed out from the shining light that grew ever closer. Its face had been confusing enough. Trying to place its exact features was beginning to make my brain hurt. The booming voice only added to the madness that was already going on inside my head, as my mind tried to reconcile something with 4 faces and 17 pair of wings.
14, 12.
Look away! I heard a small voice say to my right. It was hard to think. Where was I again? What was I looking at? Did this thing really have the head of... I felt my head jerk suddenly, and I was suddenly facing the ground. My mental faculties coming back in a sudden tidal wave. I'm sorry, servant. He doesn't yet know how things work here. I'm his escort through the 3 gates, and we only wish to pass, Daniel said from directly beside me. I could feel the heat of the light shining off of the angel, for that's what it must be, directly in front of me. I didn't know before this moment that light could have an intent, but this one somehow did. I could feel it measuring would be the best word, me, as I stood in front of it. The light shone through me, illuminating all of the errors of my life. A 20-year-old marriage down the drain because of a drunken one-night stand. A failure to keep in touch with old friends. Learning one of those friends had died third hand 3 years afterwards.
Of course, died.
The voice boomed, shaking the essence of what I was made of.
You may pass.
I felt the light move and deigned to look up. It was already drifting upwards and out of sight above the sheer walls that dominated the field of vision. Come on! I felt a pull and started stepping towards the wall. We need to get inside. Just stop! I yelled and pulled my hand away from Daniel's grasp. Tell me what the fuck is going on. What the fuck was that? How did it have that many heads? And it's letting us pass through? Aren't we already here? Haven't we already been judged by God? Daniel looked at me. There was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. Sadness, yes. Resentment, maybe. This time, though, there was one clear emotion on his face. Fear. Fear. Fear as he looked up the walls and the things that stood guard on it. Those are angels. If you're lucky, you won't see many of them. When I was alive, I thought the Bible was bullshit. And most of it is. One of the things it got right was how they looked. Of all the goddamn things for it to get right, it had to describe them correctly as those mind-bleeding things. Now we really do need to get inside before one of them comes back. I stared at Daniel. And why do we need to do that, Daniel? You don't get it yet? These aren't the walls of paradise you were taught in Sunday school. These are the walls of a prison. And the angels aren't servants of God. They're guards. Now, Daniel continued, let's get inside before another one comes down to check on us. Daniel started walking towards the wall before I could muster any kind of response to his words. If the angels were guards, what the hell were they guarding? The alabaster white wall was just in front of us now. Daniel showed no signs of stopping as he continued walking towards what looked like a solid marble pillar 6 feet across. How are we supposed to get past? My question was interrupted as the base of the unimaginably large pillar silently lifted itself up, and just enough for the both of us to pass under it. Daniel didn't stop and walked through the newly created space like he had done it 1,000 times. That pillar has to weight as much as a skyscraper. How did it lift up with no sound? I asked my guide. It's a bit pointless to ask how anything here is done. The only thing you'll get is speculations from the other people here, or because it's willed, from the Winged Peanut Gallery. Now try to not look too amazed, he said as an answer. I don't know. My sentence was cut off for the second time in as many minutes as we have stepped from under the raised pillar into a shining silver city. I'm not prone to exaggerations, so I hope you take this with all the accuracy I can muster. It was an entire city made of silver. Tall, pointed spires that gleamed brighter than any Las Vegas light show, stretched out of sight and into the infinite heavens that were somehow clear of any obstruction and impossible to see. There were numbers of smaller buildings as well, single-story square buildings that sat in the shadows of the impossibly tall spires, but still shone with the ever-present light that permeated every part of this place. 2- and 3-story perfectly round buildings were placed in the open spaces between the spires. These round buildings glowed with a blue hue that seemed to be the only color in this place beside Daniel's dark purple hair. Seeing a color outside of the pure light made me think of something. Daniel, where is everyone? He pointed toward the base of one of the tall spires. If you're unlucky enough to be stuck in the first heaven, then one of the shiny ones take you into a spire. I took another look at the spire and saw a small opening at the bottom. I wouldn't have been able to see it if Daniel hadn't literally pointed at it. The opening was seamless, showing no signs of machining or molding for it at all. It was almost like the entire spire had been melted into a single mold and cast as one solid piece. Daniel continued. You're one of the lucky ones, though, and get good old me instead. Welcome to the Silver City. He held out his hand in a mock greeting. Whatever else I had to say about Daniel, he seemed to be able to exude sarcasm without uttering a single word. You didn't answer my question. That's because I was avoiding it. I stared at him. He could probably see my annoyance because he sighed and continued. Despite how this place looks, it's pretty much empty. Anyone still around is either in the second or third heaven. Still around? Daniel looked up towards one of the spires in silence for a long moment before saying, You'll see. I was getting really tired of this cryptic shit. I've been dead for what felt like an eternity, and we had barely gone 10 feet into the Silver City. There was no one else here, and nothing to look at besides buildings that defied definition. I was getting ready to start yelling again, maybe try to get one of those angels' attentions, before I noticed something came off of one of the round 3-story buildings. A blue ball light split off from the surface of the building, followed by a second and then a third. They took their sweet time, Daniel said as the blue lights approached. Unlike the massive glowing monstrosity that greeted us at the walls, and these things were about the size of paperweights. What are they? I asked as the 3 balls orbited around my head. The glow had dimmed down to a soft buzz that didn't hurt my eyes. Cherubs. I stared at the tiny blue orbs. It didn't have any defining features I could pick out. The cherubs? The tiny flying babies from all those Renaissance paintings? Daniel laughed quietly. Another thing everyone gets wrong about this place. He pointed at one of the cherubs as it passed my vision and around the side of my head. Cherubs are the lowest of the angels. They don't do much besides sit in those round buildings, hang around people and cast judgment. These things are judging me? Right now? I looked at another blue orb, suspiciously. as it floated into my vision from the left. Judgment. Capital J. Don't worry about it too much. It's mostly a formality at this point. If there was anything you needed to worry about, it was the seraphim that cast judgment upon you at the gate. It clicked in my head. The flashes of random images, when that thing bored into my soul, I was receiving judgment. Would they find me worthy? Would I go into one of the spires despite Daniel's reassurances? One of the little blue balls stopped directly in front of me. After a second, where I felt like pissing my pants in fear, the little cherub bobbed up and down in the air. The other 2 stopped their orbits around my head and appeared next to the first one. The first one bobbed, followed by the other two copying the first, then flying off towards the building they had come from. The one that stopped its orbit first took a position at the top right of my vision and remained there. "That's a good sign," Daniel said as he watched the other two reunite with the shining blue building they had come from. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "You said before that they were guards. What exactly are they guarding?" Daniel turned his head to look at the wall behind us. "Not here. I'll tell you once we get past the second gate." Without any indication, he started walking, heading in a direction towards some unseen destination between one of the spires and a glowing cherub den. After passing the glowing round building, I could finally see where our destination seemed to be. Just past one of the immense spires there was another wall. Just like the one surrounded the Silver City, it appeared to be made of sheer white marble. Unlike the hulking thing 1,000 feet behind us, it appeared to only be around 100 feet tall. When I was alive, I would never describe anything like that as small, but apparently death does some strange things to your perceptions. The unfortunate thing about this wall, however, was the presence of what Daniel had called seraphim, sitting on top of the pillars that was the only breaks in the sheer whiteness. Just like the one that had appeared to us at the gate, these ones shined with a white light that was blinding to look upon. Daniel's words earlier did not go unheeded, and I made sure to not look directly at the thing, lest my mind break and my soul be torn asunder, or whatever the hell had happened at the front gates. The cherub that had been at my side just a minute ago flew towards the nearest of the pillars to the brightly maddening light of a seraphim. When the white of the seraphim subsumed the blue of the cherub, Daniel turned his head with a worried look on his face. "Be careful what you say from now on. That little blue bastard is listening and watching everything you say and do." I interrupted him. What shouldn't I? "Stop!" Daniel shouted, and then flinched as he looked up at the top of the wall before continuing. "You need to listen to me. That thing is not your friend. Think of it as a listening device. If you say something wrong, do something wrong, it will fly its little blue ass to the nearest seraphim." I looked up and caught a sight of blue light detaching itself from the much brighter white. "And you do not want to catch their attention," Daniel said in a quiet voice just before the blue light took its place to the side of my head. The seraphim the cherub had gone to grew in size, a bright light stretching forever into the horizon. And before I could speak, before I could even think about what was happening, a voice boomed from the pillar, in a voice that would have shaken a mountain.
Judgment has been cast, and you have been deemed worthy to enter the second heaven.
The infinite light said before it grew brighter and brighter. In another moment, everything went white. "You could have fucking told me that was going to happen!" I yelled as I felt around my sides blindly for anything to orient myself. Without any warning, the blinding light suddenly vanished, and I saw something that surprised me even more than the spires of silver and the angels that were taller than infinity. People. "Welcome to the second heaven," Daniel said. There were people everywhere, hundreds and hundreds of people standing around, each with their own white clothing and glowing blue cherub. All of them appeared to be waiting around for something as they stood in place silently. I looked up to find that we were in some sort of building, as this place actually had a ceiling instead of an open sky. "Where the hell are we?" I asked. Daniel sighed. I told you, the second heaven. Specifically, the material room." I looked around the room. Two of the walls appeared to be made of the same flawless marble the gates were made out of. Against the left wall of the massive room were a number of small pillars separated from the wall. While I was looking at the small pillars, a bright light flashed on top of one of them. Where nothing had been before, now was a small glowing cube, just big enough that it took two hands to hold. One of the glowing blue orbs in the crowd started bobbing in place until a silent person to its right looked at it. This seemed to appease the little bastard, because it flew over to another glowing cube sitting on the pillar and began bobbing up and down. The man, who looked to be in his 20s and in perfect health, walked over and grabbed the cube. And we are here, why? I asked. Because I have to do my job. And my job is to guide you to where you need to go. And you need to be guided through the second heaven. And that, he pointed at the cube the man was holding, is the material, hence material room. I looked as another flash of light lit up on another pillar, leaving behind another identical glowing cube. Another bobbing blue light led another silent person to the pillar to pick it up, just as the first person was exiting the room through a corridor on the other side of the room. Why isn't anyone talking? Daniel looked as the new person, a blonde woman, started walking to the end of the room with her glowing cube. Follow me. Daniel turned and waved towards me. Come on before your little guy decides you're taking too long. I followed him into the corridor at the end of the room. Are we prisoners? I asked. Daniel turned and looked directly at the glowing blue cherub to my left before answering. None of us are prisoners here. We do what we do because we know our purpose here. His meaning was clear enough by the fact he never broke eye contact with the glowing ball. If either one of us said the wrong thing, then this blue little bastard would report us to the nearest seraphim. Daniel continued walking into the corridor, and I followed. After a short walk behind a line of people carrying cubes in front of us and empty-handed people heading into the room to our left, we entered a massive cavern that stretched far enough that I had no estimate for how big it actually was. The ceiling was 50 feet above us, and we exited the corridor and entered the cavern proper. In front of us, in long ordered rows, were what looked to be marble anvils about 3 feet tall. Rows and columns stretched far into the distance, nearly everyone occupied by a person. As we walked, in our orderly line, I saw the little blue balls lead their charges away from the line and to designated anvils. In front of most of the anvils stood quiet people in identical white clothes, each with their own cubes, chiseling away with solid silver picks. Daniel stopped and stepped into one of the aisles of anvils. Here in manufacturing, you can see the people who have been judged worthy of entering the second heaven, making what needs to be made. I looked at one of the many anvils as a new arrival started to work on their solid cube. And what exactly are they making with this mysterious material? He looked at the chiseler as the young man started chipping away at the solid cube. The first chip that fell off lost the glow that was endemic of the rest of the cube. Here you can see as one of the worthy begin their work, creating the chains that are important to everything we do here. Chains? The odd word didn't seem to make sense with the glowing cubes I had seen already. Daniel walked down the aisle until he found another chiseler. This one's material was no longer a cube and resembled something closer to a sphere. Here you can see another one, as it becomes closer to resembling what we need. I stopped, frustrated at the continued lack of answers. Why the hell is everyone making chains? And where does everyone sleep and shit? And just what the fuck is going on? What's being chained? I regretted my words almost immediately as Daniel turned around and looked at the little cherub as it bobbed up and down in an agitated motion. There is no need to sleep here. He looked at another chiseler, this one halfway between a sphere and a cube. No one becomes hungry here. There is no pain, no sickness, and no earthly need for our heavenly bodies. Daniel paused and looked at my left before continuing. Now that you have seen where the chains are made, follow me to the entrance of the third heaven. I looked at my little tattletale. He seemed to be satisfied with Daniel's answer, as it stopped bobbing up and down and returned to its former stationary position at my left. Daniel sighed in relief and turned around to begin walking down the row. Before he could walk forward very far, however, one of the men in chiselers stopped what he was doing. The man, a young-looking gent with long hair that wouldn't look out of place in the 60s, stopped his chiseling and turned to look at us. Why are you guys the only one who get to talk to anyone? How's that fucking fair, man? Daniel looked at the young man's blue keeper. It began bobbing up and down in the same agitated motion mine had done just a minute earlier. The hippie continued his rant. How do they expect us to work like we do? Yeah, we don't get tired and we never get hungry. Well, what's the point of all of this, huh? Is what we do really worth an infinitive amount of work for all eternity? The young hippie's blue ball flew off into the distance and out of sight in just a second. For the first time since meeting him, I saw a true look of fear on his face. He reached his hand out and pushed me back a foot from the hippie. At the time, every person directly surrounding him stepped away from their workplace. The hippie sighed. Fuck me. A sudden light appeared at the top of the cavern, a bright flash and a voice made of thunder.
You are no longer worthy of the second heaven.
The seraphim said before it appeared on the ground directly in front of the hippie, enveloped him in its light, then disappeared in a flash through the roof of the cavern. Without leaving a mark anywhere, and in less than 5 seconds, the man was no longer here. The chiselers that had moved away went back to their anvils and resumed their chiseling. Where did the seraphim bring him? I asked. To a spire in the Silver City. Now come with me to the third heaven. Daniel started walking away and, with no other choice except to be carried away to a mysterious spire to never be seen again, I followed him. We passed many workers in various states of completeness on their chains as we walked. Quarter spheres, almost complete cubes and discs. After a minute of walking, I saw what I assumed to be the final product, as one of the chiselers put their tool down. A large ring sat on top of the marble anvil. It glowed with a light much brighter than the cubes they started with. As we passed, he picked up the ring and began walking just behind us, following the glowing blue light of its guide as it moved forward. Another ring began glowing on another anvil, and another follower joined us down the aisles. By the time I could see the other end of the cavern and the corridor we were walking towards, there was an orderly line of people with glowing white rings. The image would have been ridiculous if I wasn't so terrified of attracting the attention of one of the glowing monstrosities and disappearing into a spire. Guides? I asked Daniel, just ahead of me. He turned his head but continued walking. There are more than one of you? Of course. You think I show 6 billion people around here? And you're the only ones allowed to talk? He looked forward and down. He answered in a whisper that I could barely hear. Of course. How would anyone know what to do without someone telling them what's going on and what their responsibilities are? I looked at my little blue ball, seemed content with the conversation we were having. So no one ever gets tired? Have you? He was right. Despite the hours of walking I'd done since we entered the wall, I wasn't even the slightest bit sore. I wasn't thirsty, I wasn't hungry. I felt like I could walk forever. And something clicked. I looked at the people and their anvils, chiseling away at their glowing cubes, and thought about if I was doing that myself. They could work on that forever. I looked as the little blue balls led empty-handed workers towards the material room and people carrying glowing rings to the back of the line we were in the front of. An eternity of working in silence, doing the same thing over and over again. Or a mystery fate in the spire where no one's ever seen again. If... We're here, Daniel said. I looked forward, my thoughts interrupted, as we approached the short corridor. At the end of it was a large wooden door, the first thing in this entire place that wasn't made of either stone or metal. And a single man standing in front of it. I couldn't place exactly what bothered me about him until we got a bit more through the corridor and it became obvious. He was glowing. Not ridiculously bright like the seraphim, not like a soft blue like the cherubim, but a warm yellow that resonated with a sense of hope and joy. He smiled as we approached.
Guide, have you brought me one worthy of the third heaven?
Daniel took a quick look at me. Yes. The man standing in front of the wooden door smiled at the little cherub as it flew over from my side and onto his. He looked at it for a moment, nodded, and then looked at me and smiled.
You are worthy of entering the third heaven and receiving the truth. Do you wish to know?
Daniel looked at me with a severe look in his face and nodded in a "Yes, for the love of God, say yes" motion. I looked at the people behind us, waiting with their glowing rings. If there was a choice besides an eternity of chiseling a cube into a ring, then I would have to be an idiot to not take it. Yes. The glowing man smiled at me and then looked over at Daniel.
I give you leave to enter the third heaven, guide. Your charge is the serving of the tribulations.
I looked away from the glowing man to Daniel. Tribulations? Daniel motioned me to his side and we stepped aside to allow the first person behind me, with their glowing ring, to step next to the glowing man. He took the ring from the person's hand. Gabriel inspects every ring for flaws. I watched as the glowing man, Gabriel, looked at the ring in his hand. After another moment of soft glow around him. Another moment and the ring returned to his normal glow. Gabriel? I asked the glowing man. He smiled and held the glowing ring out to me. The Archangel Gabriel? Gabriel smiled. I took the ring from him, stunned at the revelation of what I was standing in front of. When Gabriel finds a ring satisfactory, someone is usually here to bring it through the door. We got lucky this time though. Daniel looked at the Archangel, who was already busy inspecting another ring. And get to bring it in ourselves. I watched as Gabriel held the ring with both hands and did the trick where he made the ring glow brighter. Unlike the other one I currently held, however, the ring in Gabriel's hands first cracked then shattered into a million shiny pieces. They seemed to disappear as the glow dissipated and faded out of existence. Sometimes the material isn't strong enough for our purposes. Now come on. Daniel turned and opened the wooden door behind Gabriel. Behind it was a large spiral staircase scored through the rock leading upwards. And in we go. Daniel held the door open for me, and I went through it, holding the glowing ring in my hands. He closed the door and we both began moving up the spiral staircase. I looked up as we took the first steps, and I could only see the bottom of the stairs as they spiraled upwards. We got a bit of walk, so if you got any questions, now would be a good time. Daniel walked in step beside me up the stairs. Now we can talk? Isn't the little blue guy? I pointed at the cherub floating next to my head. Turns us in if we say anything wrong? Now that we've left Second Heaven, there isn't much we can say that'll get them heated. The information in Second Heaven is restricted for their own good, Daniel answered. I saw a blue light float above for a second before another person, a tall woman with a short afro, appeared from around the corner. Daniel nodded at her as she passed down the stairs. She smiled back at him as she did. Someone you know? I attempted a light-hearted tone of conversation, as Daniel had seemed to grow more relaxed as we walked up the stairs. I know everyone who travels here. It's my burden to know. Everyone in the cavern you walk through there. Every person traveling down these stairs. I've guided every single person in this section of Second Heaven here. How's that possible? There must have been tens of thousands of people down there hammering away on those things. 144,000, he corrected. How is that possible? Even if you never slept and never did anything else, you died in, what, 2005, 2006? That makes no sense. Time is... Daniel trailed off for a second. Different here. Well, not exactly different. It's hard to explain. A moment can last forever. An eternity could be a blink of an eye, or something to that effect. I turned my head and looked at him. I know it doesn't make much sense. I don't really get it either. It's impossible to keep track of it anyway, with no reference points to compare it to. He added, no shitting, no sleeping, no eating, no drinking. I filled in. Yeah, exactly. We walked another moment in silence. Another person passed us during this period and waved at Daniel, and Daniel nodded back as he passed. What information is so dangerous that the people stuck in Second Heaven can't know it? It's the material and what the material is used for. They've been judged worthy to know that they're making the chains to contain something dangerous. Dangerous enough that it threatens all of existence if it escapes. If they knew the truth, then they wouldn't make the chains. At least that's what I was told. I'm personally not so sure, but I'm not exactly in charge here. Who is then? I asked. This question has been burning in my mind since seeing the empty Silver City. I had seen angels of all types and people who never tired on a quest of eternal servitude. But who did they serve? No one really, as far as I can tell. I looked at the blue ball floating by me. Daniel caught my look and continued. They definitely aren't. They serve just like all of us. Of course they don't have free will like we do. The person who guided me compared them to computer algorithms. Some, like Gabriel, more complicated than others, but still algorithms that follow a set of rules we will never know. An eternity with no answers and eternal work. This sounds more like hell than heaven. Daniel barked a laugh. Hell is just the absence of God. We're about there now. I'm getting really tired of... I was interrupted by the shining brightness of the sky above us. The staircase embedded in the ground finally ended, and we reached the surface of wherever we were going. I saw it once we were finally open to the sky. This, Daniel motioned forward, is the third heaven. Welcome to God's kingdom. In front of us stood a giant glowing sphere, thousands of feet wide, floating in the air. Surrounding it was a latticework of marble stairs, ladders and scaffolds that surrounded it completely and allowed almost completely unrestricted movement around the sphere. And that, Daniel continued, is God. I looked away from the sphere and stared at Daniel. God? The ruler of all creation? The creator? God isn't the ruler of all creation. He is creation. I looked at the glowing rings in my hands, at the little blue ball floating next to my head, and then at Daniel. Then the angels aren't just guarding us, are they? Daniel looked at the glowing ball in the distance. No. He paused for a minute, staring at the massive ball of light that was apparently the creator of everything, and then continued. Soon after God made creation, he tried to unmake it. I stared at the giant glowing orb. I stared at God. The God that wanted to unmake his creation. That ring you hold, he pointed at the glowing ring, is belief. Belief forged from the souls of everyone who won't make the chains that bind. When they won't make the chains, they become the chains. I remember what Daniel had said to me when we began our journey here. The spires? The only ones in the Silver City? He nodded. But it's God, I said. If he created everything, then how is this even possible? How are we even still here? The belief that he is a creator that doesn't want to destroy us keeps him bound. That we are only his creation, and our beliefs can only keep him bound for so long. The bonds break and need constant replacement. Your job, your tribulation, is to replace those bonds as they break. It was at this moment that I truly understood the term truth. The truth of all existence. The truth that God thought he made a mistake with existence. Fuck! I dropped the ring I was carrying and clutched my chest with both hands when I felt a sudden sharp pain. What is it? Daniel looked concerned. Pain! Was the only word I could get out. The chest pain spread to my extremities and I collapsed to the ground, unable to stand. Daniel moved quickly to look directly at my eyes. Something was happening, and it was obvious from the look in his eyes that he knew exactly what was happening. You don't have long. My name is Daniel Marsh. I lived in Rochester, New York. Tell Mary I'm... Daniel's voice trailed off as a black hole closed around my vision and I lost consciousness. The next thing I knew, I was in a hospital bed and everything hurt. The doctor told me later that I was lucky to survive the drunk driver hitting me. According to him, I had been dead for 5 minutes and 57 seconds. What surprised me even more was my ex-wife sleeping in the chair next to my hospital bed. Apparently, I had never taken her name off of my emergency contact list. Even with all the pain I'd caused her, she had still shown up when I had almost been gone forever. I still haven't fully recovered from the accident. The memories of what happened in those 5 minutes and 57 seconds are still fresh in my mind. I didn't think I would ever show anyone these memories, as I mostly wrote them down for my own benefit. Even with how vivid it had been, I couldn't believe that it actually had happened. And then I checked for a Daniel Marsh in Rochester, New York. The obituary photo from 2007 showed a bit of an older man in his early 30s, but the foxhawk was still there. I thought back to what he'd said right before I was no longer dead. Hell is just the absence of God. If God wants to unmake all of creation, and hell is the absence of Him, then I would rather go to hell.